Good evening. This is OTAKING seminar, and today is January 7th. I'm just gonna say a regular hello since 7 days have already passed from New Year's. Today's topic is animation director Hayao Miyazaki and Laputa, Castle in the Sky, but there's no time to chit-chat today, really. I'm gonna make this clear, but today's topic will not fit in just one broadcast. So, I'll do the first half today and the second half next week. I thought I could finish this in one broadcast, but as I started preparing, well, I noticed it wasn't that easy, so I'll spend enough time on this. But instead, I want to make sure that this will be the final version for Laputa. I'll talk with an assumption that all of you have watched Laputa, so I don't need to worry about spoilers, do I? I've titled the series The Chronicle of Ghibli Wars, and today's episode is Laputa. The reason is because when I researched about Laputa, I wanted to talk about Porco Rosso, and if I talk about Porco Rosso, I'd want to also discuss the castle of Cagliostro thoroughly. Then I started wondering then what about Princess Mononoke? And so on. As a result, I was like, then I'll need to feature all Ghibli movies, which include all movies by Isao Takahata as well. So I've decided to start from Future Boy Conan and continue till the latest work. It'll be titled The Chronicle of Ghibli Wars. I want to basically discuss how Takahata Miyazaki and producer Toshio Suzuki have battled through their anime-making warlords and how Ghibli collapsed. Well, they didn't collapse, but how they once dissolved and then eventually came back together. Friday Roadshow is now showing 3 Ghibli works in a row. Kiki's Delivery Service on January 5th, Tales from Earthsea on the 12th, and The Castle of Cagliostro on the 19th. Well, I could also discuss each movie in this order, but I'd rather discuss them in my preferred order, which makes it easier to talk about or discuss. A comment just said that it would take at least half a year to discuss them all, but basically, I want to feature one movie a month, so I'll discuss Laputa today and Porco Rosso around next month. That's the kind of pacing I'm planning right now. So, today is the first episode of this series. Laputa, Castle in the Sky, came out in 1986. First, I want to discuss what was going on inside Ghibli around this time. To do that, I made this chronological table of Ghibli. This is it. The real chronology should be more detailed, like when the comic version of Nausicaa started around here, or it got suspended, etc. But those are not included here. I just wrote down what was necessary for today. First, Future Boy Conan was aired in 1978, and Castle of Cagliostro was shown in theaters in December 1979. I think this was the first evaluation period of Miyazaki. Miyazaki made 26 episodes for NHK called Future Boy Conan, which is based on a novel titled The Incredible Tide. People quickly acknowledged his talent. Then he made Castle of Cagliostro, which was his first feature film. This was the first evaluation period. Well, he was still only known within the anime industry then. However, as you all know, this was a major, historical box office bomb, and Miyazaki was instantly deprived of making a movie. But after 5 years of silence, he released Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind in March 1984, and he also worked on its comic version during this time. Then finally Laputa was released in August 1986. There is a 2-year gap between those two pieces because the staff were disbanded after Nausicaa, and then reassembled for Laputa, which added extra unnecessary work. The reason I also listed Grave of the Fireflies, which was Takahata's work, here is because Laputa became the last work that Takahata produced. Or, you can say Miyazaki became independent from Takahata after Laputa. It means their ideological differences became clear, or Miyazaki finally graduated from the school of Takahata. And Miyazaki no longer needed to be produced by him after Laputa. You can tell that Takahata complained a lot about Laputa, while Miyazaki also said things about Takahata as the grave of the fireflies and only yesterday. He was like, gee, why would he do that? So it's clear Laputa was the turning point where their ideologies completely diverged from each other. Then, My Neighbor Totoro and The Grave of the Fireflies were released in 1988. Totoro is highly rated now, but Totoro and The Grave of the Fireflies did pretty poorly in theaters. So, actually, Nausicaa was the only one that was a box office success, compared to other pieces. But although I won't call Laputa a complete failure, it still didn't recoup its budget in theaters, which they had to make up through VHS sales later on. And as I said, Totoro and The Grave of the Fireflies were flops. Ghibli started making profits from Kiki's delivery service in 1989. So that's the major flow of events. And what did Ghibli do when they suddenly had money in their hands? They made Only Yesterday in 1991, which went into the red. On top of that, Miyazaki and Takahata could no longer work in the same room around this time. In 1992, when Miyazaki made Porco Rosso, even though they were both working for Ghibli, they started working in different studios. Consider this the major historical flow of Ghibli. Now, I talked about this in a rerun on the New Year's Day, so you may all know. When Miyazaki's Future Boy Conan was released, unfortunately, Farewell to Space Battleship Yamato came out. Miyazaki was like, Future Boy Conan is the true sci-fi. This is the anime. It was on the national channel NHK and all that. But because Yamato created a major animation boom, almost no one really appreciated Future Boy Conan, except for some anime buffs. Not only that, when Miyazaki made his first feature film, The Castle of Cagliostro, claiming, I put in everything that I wanted to express in this piece, the epic series Mobile Suit Gundam began airing on TV almost at the same time, and as a result, all anime magazines, except for Animeju, pretty much only cared about Gundam. We feel that Nausicaa was so popular back in the days just because it's been on reruns so many times, but in fact its box office record was not that different from the movie version of Super Dimension Fortress Macross that came out around the same time. Plus, Macross clearly sold more merchandise than Nausicaa if we count the sales of related products. That's why the 70s to early 80s, from Future Boy Conan to Laputa, were a complete dark age for Miyazaki, despite the fact that he was allowed to produce films. So, I categorize him as a creator who could not keep up with the so-called first anime boom that started with Space Battleship Yamato and ended with Super Dimension Fortress Macross. But of course, that also means no one at that time really understood how great Miyazaki was. Now, Miyazaki refers to Castle of Cagliostro, Nausicaa, Laputa, and Totoro as a rectangle. Well, Miyazaki himself talks about this episode in an interview in this stylish magazine called Cut, and he talked a lot there. So, most of what Miyazaki said, which I'll quote, are from this interview. And I'll quote other people from the books I've aligned here. For example, I'll quote from this book called Ghibli's Textbook, Laputa, Castle in the Sky. I also thought this book was pretty cool. It's called Another Balse, written by a production assistant of Laputa called Mr. Kihara. And it's got some good stories, so I'll sample them as well. So, for today's broadcast, these published texts will be the basis of what I will discuss in the lecture.